Today we're going to talk about Bernard Cornwell's Sharpe's Command. But first, a message from our sponsor. Just kidding. This is my channel. Who am I? My name is Cody Singdahl. I am the author that you know. I'm the author of 6 novels and three nonfiction work. Three nonfiction works. One of which you can get for free if you go down in the description below and you join my email list. This first one, it's kind of an experiment to see how this works with giving something away for free. So this is the Engdahl uh, glossary, and what it is a compilation of the glossaries that I put at the end of all my novels. Now, what are those? I write historical, military novels, and I explain most things as I write, but sometimes there are words or phrases that are either archaic or they're military terms or foreign terms that the reader may not be familiar with, that I don't want to stop the narrative to explain, or I explained them previously and don't want to continuously do that. So I put them in the glossary. And so I thought it'd be a nice idea to put them all together as one and as one glossary, and then give that away to my email list. So you can get that for free uh, in PDF. I'm sorry, in e form, either as a PDF or as a Kindle file or a Mobi file or something you can read on your Nook, or there's multiple formats. So check it out. Eventually, and by eventually I mean this, by the end of this year, I hope to have a novella, which is a prequel to my series, and a prequel to Rampage on an immediate prequel to Rampage on the River, that will be free and exclusive to my email list. So jump on that. So let's get to work here. Today we're going to talk about uh, one of my all-time favorite authors, and I will say that Bernard Cornwell is one of the 4 pillars. Notice that I didn't use my thumb. I try to use the German thumb as a number, but I can't do it for 4. So I usually do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which American is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I probably should stick with because I'm not German. Well, I am German, but only of heritage and not nationality. So Bernard Cornwell is one of the 4 pillars of my inspiration to write myself. And what I mean by that is not necessarily my favorite, although I think the 4 pillars are 4 of my favorite authors, but those that had inspired me to pick up the occupation myself. So I would say the first one, and I'll go in order in which they're introduced to me. So the first one is Alexandre Dumas, who wrote the Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo. And I remember, I mean, I grew up knowing who like the Count of Monte Cristo and the Musketeers were, but was it in the 90s? I got my copy of the Three Musketeers and absolutely fell in love with that book. It was everything I ever wanted. I think part of it is because I grew up in the 70s watching like black and white films on local television, usually like the what do you call those, the small stations that weren't the big networks, like on channel 15, channel 20 in Detroit. And so the black and white Errol Flynn swashbucklers, I fell in love with that romantic idea of the debonair, gentlemanly hero who was adept at, he wasn't big and brawny. He was lithe and acrobatic and quick with a sword and with a wit and always on the right side of morality. And I realized that probably came from Alexander Dumas, or at least one of the purveyors of that. Dumas wrote, basically his career is mid 19th century, and from maybe the 1830s all the way up. I think his last novel that I know of, I believe, was The Prussian Terror, which I've read, which is about the Austro-Prussian War, and I think he died shortly thereafter that being published. But anyway, um, that really struck me, like the Musketeers, which ended up being, depends on how they're compiled, anywhere between 3 to 5 novels. And the reason being is that Dumas did not write those as novels, or more like the publishing, the way books were published back in Dumas' time were one of the ways, or one of the most popular ways, is that writers like Dumas would write a serial that would be used to sell a newspaper or a magazine that would be published weekly or monthly. And the idea behind that was to get people hooked into the stories, so they came back next week or the next month to buy the next issue. And so when you read a Dumas novel, every chapter is a story into itself, and it ends kind of in a cliffhanger that's going to drag you to the next one. And that's how I write. I model myself ultimately by Alexander Dumas. The next step in my of inspiration to be a writer is who we're talking about today, Bernard Cornwell. And I I had always loved historical things. And as an adult, as a reader, I wasn't quite sure. I mean, I'll tell you, even as a child, I think the first genre that I read and was interested in was the mystery. And I think it's because my first novel I ever read was The Curse of the Whispering Mummy by Alfred Hitchcock. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought, okay, that's what it is. I like mysteries. This was in the second grade. I think I even ventured into Agatha Christie at some point. Probably didn't understand it too much, but then I started reading the Escape to the Mushroom Planet series. I can't remember the name of the author, but I do have the book one in my library back there that I need to reread. And I think at that point is I decided that I really like science fiction, and anyway, I won't go through the whole story, but eventually, I went from into science fiction, and then I got into like war novels as a young teen, like Vietnam era stuff. Um, and after that, I started getting into like satire. Like I read Catch 22, and I read a lot of Mikhail Bulgakov and things like that, and kind of banned book kind of stuff. But I really would. I've always, even as a child, loved historical adventure stuff, like especially in the age of swords. I guess from the ancients all the way up into the uh, mid 19th century. And when I came at some point, I went to live abroad, and I taught English in Japan and then Portugal. And when I lived in Portugal, I lived in a little village called, or not a village, I'd say a town called Tosfedras. And at some point, I realized I had to come home and become an adult again. And so I came home, and I was kind of sad that I had to give up that fantasy of living abroad. And I was at the grocery store, of all places. And I have never seen a Bernard Cornwell book again at the grocery store, but I found a book called Sharpe's Escape. And I'm like, and it showed Napoleonic era soldiers, British soldiers. And I was like, wow, this looks great. And then I read the back. I could not believe it. It takes place in Torres and like the town that I lived in. And I was like, holy cow. So I bought it, fell immediately in love with it. But not only did I fall in love with it, but I discovered the genre in which I now profess, and it's what I write in. And I will pretty much believe that I will be writing in this genre for the rest of my life. Yes, it would be fun to write horror, and I have written horror, or write science fiction or fantasy, or all sorts of genres out there. But at some point, as an author, unless you have pen names, you really need to kind of pick your place. And my place is the historical novel. And I have plenty of ideas that I will be, if I wrote all the books I have planned right now, that's probably will take me the rest of my life. life. So I'm in no need of adding on to that by writing other genres. So I fell in love with Bernard Cornwell, and I ended up reading every single Richard Sharpe book I could get my hands on, and and then when I ran out of those, I read all his other series too. He's got a lot of medieval stuff. He's got one. The one that got made, well, first of all, the Richard Sharpe books, many of them got made into made for television movies in Britain. I'm not too sure if it was made for television movies or if they were episodes of a show that got turned into a movie. I'm not quite sure how that worked. Um, but he's also they made a streaming series called The Last Kingdom, based off of what in the literary world is called this, I believe, the Saxon series, and that's about Uhtred Beoband. I can't remember how to say his name, but those take place in like I think the 800s and early 900s in Britain, uh, prior to the Norman invasion. And really, what the story tells is about, or at least the first several books, are the rise of Alfred the Great through the eyes of a quasi-fictional, quasi-historical character that is Uhtred. And then there's several others. There's one that is later on about the Hundred Years' War. He's got his American Civil War series that's got 4 novels, which he says that is basically as if, I mean, it's not Richard Sharpe, but the character is very much, in his words, like Richard Sharpe, but put him in the American Civil War instead of the Napoleonic Wars. I have read those books, and I don't think that's I don't think that's really true. I think the main character is very different. But I think Bert Cornwell wrote some contemporary sailing thrillers in the 90s, which he himself says that he did that kind of chasing the trend, and isn't particularly proud of those works. Those are the only things I haven't read, and I haven't read some of his short stories either. But I've read everything else. I'm trying to think if there's any other series that he's got a lot of standalone series. He's got one that's about Stonehenge, which is really interesting. He has some that he wrote with his wife. That I think a Crowning Mercy, and it's British Civil War, and then the sequel to it takes place in the Napoleonic Wars, which really doesn't make sense. But apparently, the idea behind the sequel, well, not apparently, the idea is, because they're involved, is that the sequel to that is it's like the granddaughter of the woman, or great grand, the descendant of the woman that's in uh, the English Civil Wars, and we're talking around 1650. Her descendant in the Napoleonic Wars, which is early 19th century. So, sorry. So that was a long rambling thing to say that Bernard Cornwell is a big hero of mine, and not only that, but a big hero of many of the people who write in my genre. So I'm a fan of Rock Paper Swords. The host is Stephen A. McKay and Mackay, you're supposed to say, and Matthew Harvey. Both are historical novelists like me. They write more medieval stuff, and they're big acolytes of Bernard Cornwell, and even had him on there. And almost every single one of their guests lists Bernard Cornwell as one of their inspirations, and he's one of mine too. Okay, we got 2 more to cut. I'm spending way too much time on this. 2 more to go. I'll be real quick. I got a Kindle after years and years and years of being, I'll never read on Kindle. I only read real books. So at some point, I decided to get a Kindle, and one of the things I like about it is that the books are a lot cheaper. And I'll tell you now, I don't even use my Kindle anymore. I exclusively, or almost exclusively, read on the Kindle app on my phone. And the reason being is this is always with me, so I can be standing in the line at the grocery store and read. I can read anytime I want to because it's always with me. And a lot of times in the middle of the night when I can't sleep, instead of turning on the light and waking myself up even more, or Laura's sleeping next to me, I can open this up and I can read in the dark because this is lit. And what it does is it knows it's dark, so it'll do a black screen with light letters, and it'll adjust the light level too, so it stays within, um, it's not overpowering my eyes. So it's easy for me to fall back asleep and not to upset my or wake up my partner when I'm sleeping in the middle of the night. And I hate to admit that I think the last two books I read, I finished them reading overnight because I couldn't sleep. And so I ended up, and usually like the last 100 pages of a book, the last third of a book is, I call it the water slide, where like now everything is happening really fast and all the threads are coming together. And it's the beginning, the first third and the last third are probably the most, just by default, most exciting parts of most books. And that's why I always try to make the middle part exciting too. So anyway, I got a Kindle. I take way too long to tell the story. So I got a Kindle, and I was very excited about it. And I was like, okay, what can I read on this? And and Bernard Cornwell is still very expensive. I mean, look at this. He's $12.99 for the Kindle version. I mean, I sell some of my paperbacks are $12.99. But I started discovering, at the time I didn't realize it, but independent authors. And I saw a book called Medieval, and it was an interesting story. I can't remember if that one was about the Crusades or not, but it was by K.M. Ashman, who I now know as Kevin Ashman, and who I'm Facebook friends and have had great interactions, and I consider Kevin a friend. And I read that book, and I think I got it for a couple bucks, man. I can't remember how much it was, maybe $3.99, but it was cheap. I didn't have to think about it. There was like, okay, there was no hesitation with the price. It's like, this looks good. Let's see what this is. I was stunned how good it was, and ended up reading all of the books in that series, all the books in another series that he wrote called Roman, and all the books in a third. I read 3 of his series all the way through, back to back. Love his writing. I still love his writing. And Kevin, what Kevin did for me, it was what Bernard Cornwell did was define the genre. I didn't realize there was a contemporary genre called historical fiction. I thought if I wanted to read about the past, adventures that took place in the past, I had to read books that were written back then. Cornwell taught me that no, people today are writing this stuff and then doing the research and bringing it back alive to you. So I learned about the genre from Bernard. I learned that that I always wanted to write and be a published author. And I always thought the only way of doing that was finding an agent and then having that agent find me a book deal. And Kevin Ashman showed me that no, you can be successful as an independent. So the last pillar is Arturo Perez Reverte, who is probably one of my maybe top 3 living authors, if not number 1. And he's got a series called A la Triste, which is like kind of a Spanish musketeer in the 1600s. And I love his writing so much. His writing just really, really hits me, really hits me deep. It's poetic, but not pretentious. It has that kind of tragic drama that Spaniards have. And he's a Spaniard, and his books that I have read are English translations of books that are written in Spanish. And I read the first one and absolutely fell in love with the character, fell in love with the story, everything. I read the second one, and I can't remember where it was, but so many times I'd be reading Perez Reverte, and just putting the book down and just like having to take a breath and just soaking in what I just read because it was so profound and so beautiful and tragic and just great. Just everything I love. And there was a time where that happened where I said, I have to write. I'm going to start writing. This is it. I want to do this. I want to do what he just did to me. I want to do to others. So I started writing. So there you go. That was a very long. God, we went 20 minutes into that. But I wanted to explain to you how important Bernard Cornwell is to me. Cornwell has written now, by my count, 24 novels. And no, I'm sorry, more than 50. He's written more than 24 Sharpe novels, and this is his latest one. And he is in his 80s, and he is. I don't think most writers truly ever retire. He's kind of semi-retired in that he, when he picked up writing, he was doing a neck break pace of 2 novels a year, which is a lot. I write a novel every 1 to 2 years is basically my pace. Bernard has now taken on a pace similar to that, maybe a novel a year. And not only that, but he has written. I think he's retired from writing all the other different series. He ended the Uhtred series, and so the Richard Sharpe series is his favorite. It's his home, and so he is. I believe I heard him say, just concentrating on writing Richard Sharpe books. By the way, he somewhat ended it, but there is still room for more. The last novel takes place after the Napoleonic Wars, in which Richard goes to Chile to help an old friend fight a bad guy. I can't remember what it was about. And he could write more after that. But what's interesting, and I'll talk about this in the review, is that I believe, I think Cornwell wrote his first novel or published his first novel in 81. And the first several books that he wrote came in quick succession after that. And they were all Richard Sharpe books. And I cannot remember which one. It might be Sharpe's Eagle is the first one. And that's where this naming convention started, where all the Richard Sharpe books, and it's the only series that does this, that has like a naming convention that is in all the titles. It's always Sharpe's, like possessive, and then one word. So it's always a 2-word title. Sharpe's something, Sharpe's Gold, Sharpe's Command, Sharpe's Regiment, Sharpe's Havoc. And so I think the initial Sharpe books were written one after the other. And maybe I can't remember exactly, like 4 to 6 books written in chronological order in which they take place in time, and one after the other. And then he may have, I don't know at what point he branched away from Sharpe and did other things. But at some point, he had a Sharpe series that was written in order, starting with, I believe, Sharpe's Eagle, in which Richard Sharpe captures one of those golden eagles that the Napoleonic troops use as a banner for their regiment. And then the final book at that time was Waterloo, or Sharpe's Waterloo, in which Sharpe fights in the Battle of Waterloo, which is the capstone of the Napoleonic Wars. And then, I don't know in what order he did this, but he started writing books that either happened after, well, there's only one book that he's written that takes place after Waterloo. But he wrote about, I think, 4 novels. Well, no, I'm getting off track because I don't know everything. He started writing books that take place not only before the first book of Sharpe he wrote and after, but also in between, and inserting, expanding the timeline out by inserting novels into different places to flesh out this career that now, if you start the Sharpe novels and you read them in the not the order that they're published, but the chronological order in which they take place. The very first book, Sharpe's Tiger, which I've read them all, takes place in India in like 1790 something, in which Sharpe is a private and are fighting a war, a true battle against some Indian warlord or something. And he's just a private. And I think there's 4 books until you get to the actual Napoleonic Wars. So I think there's at least 2, if not more, that take place in India. He wrote a book about the British bombing of Copenhagen, and Richard Sharpe is sent into Copenhagen before the bombing uh, on some kind of secret mission, and that was a good book. And then there's Richard Trafalgar. I'm not saying that right. Trafalgar. It's mostly because I can't speak well, because that's my excuse today, because my mouth is swollen from the cancer treatment and all that. But Trafalgar, something like that. Trafalgar, or something like that. It's a famous battle in which Admiral Lord Nelson, defeated the French Navy and basically knocked them out of the fight for the rest of the conflict. So anyway, like I said, Bernard Cornwell at some point decided that he was going to dial back the pace of writing. He was going to write at a leisurely pace that he enjoys, and he's going to write Richard Sharpe books, and he's going to insert them different places. And I've read several of these books that he has written since he has declared this, and this is the latest one, and he has a new one that's coming out real soon, and I don't know when it's coming out. So let's get to my review. By the way, I will say this. A lot of people say they don't read because they don't have time to read, or they find themselves, they can't get into the book, and they get distracted. And I'm one of those people. I have been a reader all my life. Like I said, I think I started reading my first novels when I was in the 2nd grade. And I've read novels off and on. And there are periods of my life where I didn't read. I wasn't reading novels. Since I became an author myself, I have made it a point, part of my job, to read novels, both classic and contemporary, within my genre and outside of it. Good novels and bad novels, to learn for the big part, and also not to be a hypocrite, but mostly because to me, there's nothing. I would rather read a good novel than watch a good movie. There's nothing better and more exciting to me than reading a great novel. And one thing I learned about reading novels is that let's see. I don't know why it doesn't. It defaulted back off my own personal page. I want to be on my personal page. I read this somewhere in just studying about how to write better and all that. And one of the things I learned is that, they said that don't work too hard at describing everything. Let your reader do some of that work. And I believe in this. And that the writing novels, the act of the communication from the writer to the reader, is really a creative partnership that is 50-50, if not more so on the reader's end than the writer's end. Because the writer can only suggest what's happening, but it's the reader's mind that takes the suggestions, the words of the writer, and constructs it in their head. And this is why people always say the book was better than the movie. Well, usually because the movie is like a very shortened version of what the book, and that's what's great about streaming services, is that they can do longer storytelling. But putting a full-length typical novel into a 2-hour movie, it just doesn't fit. And so That's one thing. But the biggest thing is that when you read a novel, especially if you've never seen the movies or you've had no visual cues of what things look like, you're constructing it in your head. And it's a magical thing once you get into the trick of doing this. Once you get into a novel and you are creating what the characters look like in your mind, and you're creating what the scenes look like in the backgrounds and everything like that. It really is a magical transportive activity that you can do that's very satisfying. And so when you get a good novel, I mean, there are novels that I have labored to get through, and there's novels where um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? That I'm losing my mind. I can't think of words anymore. Um, that I missed, that I uh, had remorse for finishing too soon because I didn't want it to end. There have been novels where I actually slowed down my reading um, because I didn't want it to end. I think Mikhail Bulgakov's Master and Margarita was one of those books where I just wanted it to last forever. So that's a very magical thing. And so, but I got away from reading. And when I started at some point where I felt like I was not reading enough because I was leaving up to I'll read when I feel like it. I made it a point that every day I had to read 20 minutes. No matter what, I can find 20 minutes to sit down. I set a timer, and for 20 minutes, I'm not allowed to scroll, check my emails or do anything online, do anything. I have to sit and have to read until the alarm goes off. Now, typically, I do that now and I keep reading. But what has happened is not only just based on that alone, I'm getting to novels quicker, but because I read every day, I'm reading quicker in the time that I read. So in that 20 minutes time, I'm covering more ground. I'm reading more words. I'm getting through more chapters than I did a year or two ago. And my pace for reading novels has really, really, and of course, some novels are very short. I think of novels in terms of word count and page count because the difference can vary greatly, depends on the dimensions of the book. In fact, just a little trick to keep a book cheaper, like Blood for Blood at Nashville, or I'm sorry, Mexico My Love, would have been like $18 for the paperback had I kept it at the same format as the other three books, because it would have been over 500 pages. But by switching from a 5x8 to a 6x9 format, it went from over 500 pages to like 340 pages. Same word count. So people say, well, how many pages is it? Page count doesn't matter because it depends on how many words they put on a page. See how that works? So what I'm trying to say is that typically it used to take me a month, maybe a month and a week to read a novel. At some point, I was reading novels not too long ago under a month. Now I'm reading novels under 2 weeks, sometimes just over a week's time. Sharpe's Command I read in 9 days, and so if it's a good book, I'm going to read it more because I'm going to read it even outside of my 20-minute requirement. I'm going to say, well, I got some time. I'd like to read some more of this or read it in the middle of the night. But I am reading faster too, so that's a good thing. So let's take a look at my review. So if you want to see where my review is, I post everything. I have social media presence on multiple platforms. I think my biggest platform is Facebook. You can see right here I have 3,500 followers. So it's where I have the biggest splash. So if you come down here, this is the link to the video you're watching here. But here is the review. And just so you know, I write a review, I share it on Goodreads, I share it on Amazon, and then I put it in my. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Hang on a second. That's not what I wanted you to look at. Let me close that. Ugh. Okay, that is this is the review. Okay, let's click on that. I I put it on WordPress to make it easier to share. And I think because it opens up a new window, I have to stop sharing this window and start sharing the new window. So I'm going to remove that, stop screen share. Everything is so damn slow. It's frozen. Come on. But the WordPress version allows me to, okay, I was at page. Oh, I think it's okay. I'm back. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Let me make sure I'm back here. Yeah, I'm back. Okay, thanks. If you made it through that, thank you um uh for hanging in there. We're gonna read my review now. Here we go. I put it on WordPress because it's easier to share it in other places like Facebook and Twitter. So here's a review of Sharpe's Command by Bernard Cornwell. Another exhilarating installment of the Richard Sharpe saga. Bernard Cornwell reminds us once again why he's still the master of military historical fiction. The setup is simple. Two French armies have a river keeping them from uniting and destroying the British army that's intent on driving them out of Spain. Major Sharpe and his green jacketed riflemen must reconnoiter the one bridge that could bring those French armies together into an unstoppable force. But nothing can ever be simple for Sharpe. Treachery and his own hot-headedness turn a simple reconnaissance mission into a desperate fight for his life. Sharpe's Command is the 24th novel in the Sharpe series, but chronologically it's book 14. The story lies between Sharpe's Command and Sharpe's Sword novels. The book centers around the historic Battle of Almarez in Spain during the Napoleonic Wars in the spring of 1812. It features real historical characters like General Hill, Lieutenant Love, and amongst others. Cornwell published the first several books of the series in chronological order in the early 80s, but has since written novels that take place earlier, later, and even, as with Sharpe's Command, in between previously published books. That's more easily done because Sharpe's novels are more episodic than serialized, meaning each book is a self-contained story that can be read out of order, like watching an episode or a TV episode of the A-Team. Even though I've already read novels about Sharpe's adventures at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 and after the war, I could still enjoy this story, which takes place years earlier in his career. Cornwell gives you all you need to know in each novel, as if it's the first of the series you have read, instead of forcing you to do homework and read everything prior. Sharpe is the embodiment of class struggle. He was a bastard son of a long dead prostitute. He was raised in an orphanage and promoted from the enlisted ranks. He has an anti authority chip on his shoulder that causes him to rail against slights, real and imagined, from upper class officers. He soothes his self conscious imposter syndrome with crassness, disobeying orders, and diving headlong into fights with brutal savagery. This causes him plenty of problems. But Sharpe is also fair-minded, heroic, and sometimes even kind, making him a hero we can root for. This book is full of intense action sequences, some of which had me gripping my Kindle with white-knuckled anticipation. That's true. Cornwell is a master of writing battle scenes as well as foreshadowing, leading you through the narrative page by page. Cornwell also deftly explains many technical aspects of early 19th century warfare, like the advantage of British rifles over French muskets, the seven-barreled volley gun, and the heavy cavalry saber. Sharpe's Command is an action-packed romp which I plowed through with reckless abandon. I can't say that with my mouth all swollen. I can hardly wait for the next installment, which is also true. Check out, uh, um, sorry, Sharpe's Command here, and here's a preview embedded in my. Let's see if I can. Yeah. So Amazon allows you to, I think, read the first 10% of a book. It goes right to chapter one, and then also this is one of the reasons why I do these on through my blog posts, because I can also plug my own book, The French Fiasco, that came out April 16th, and you can read a preview here as well. So that's it. Let me get back here. Oh, good. And I was up during that whole time. Yeah, I still love a good uh, Bernard Cornwell novel. He's got another Sharpe novel coming out soon. I haven't looked to see what it is. I will probably be reading it and reviewing it at some point. Right now, I am reading Colin Faulconer's a novel, um, Stigmata, and I'm really enjoying it. It reminds me a lot of, so far, it reminds me very much of Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Is it Follett or Follet? I think it's Follett. He's British, and it's great. There seems to be two main characters. One is the daughter of a stone mason, stone carver, who is beautiful, which causes her a lot of grief and trouble with men in power. But she has visions that may be inspired. And then the other one is a knight who returns uh, from the Crusades, and he's troubled. He's grieving because his wife died while he was gone, and I think at some point their paths are going to cross. But it has me hooked right away. I'm doing pretty well. That's three novels in a row at least that I have been really enjoying. So I'm reading this one. That'll be the next. Colin Faulconer is an excellent case study. I have some assumptions about him. I would like to ask him, actually. I discovered him through the internet. And what I suspect, I think Faulconer is around the same age of Bernard. He's definitely older than me, maybe in his 60s, 70s, early 80s. He looks very healthy. He's always smiling, traveling with his wife, drinking a cocktail in some great exotic place. But he's got a series. I can't remember what the name of this. The series has some generic name like Historical Adventure or something like that. There's 15 novels in it, and I think some of them are sequels to the others, but other than that, most of them are completely unconnected, and they go everywhere between ancient Rome to, I believe, World War II. But he put them all into a series because I believe that he, because in my genre, which is the um, military historical fiction, or action and adventure historical fiction, uh, series do better because people tend. the readers almost expect a series. So you want to write at least a trilogy. They like to Our readers like to find a series that they can they tend to be voracious readers. So they want a series that they can dig into for that will hold them off for a while, so they don't have to go looking for something else to read. You see what I'm saying? And I think they were trained by people like Bernard Cornwell and Patrick O'Brien, C.S. Forster, who wrote very long series that a historical, a military historical fiction enthusiasts can really dig their teeth into, sink their teeth into, and read for a while. So there's that. I suspect that Faulkner was originally um, traditionally published. And I believe that what has happened with him, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe that at some point he decided to get back the publishing rights to all his works, and then to publish them all as an independent author. And not only that, but it appears that he has gone and gotten branded covers so that all the covers of his books have a very similar look and feel to them. And he might have changed that. I'm not quite sure because the monitor on my computer is broken, so the chroma's off. I can't quite see the colors very well, but it looks like most of the covers are like a white field with like a single object in the center, and then the title and his name, and they all have that look. So you can immediately identify, oh, that's a Colin Faulkner. So he's really doing branding very well. I got to the point where I was seeing him so much, I'm like, I got to read one of his books. He does excellent social media marketing, both organic and paid. And he's also been doing rotating 99 cent or 99 pence, or sometimes it's $1.99, but discount deals on his novels. And so I ended up picking up two. And at some point after I picked up two, I was like, I gotta stop buying this guy's novels, because if I jump on every 99 cent novel he does, I'm gonna have my list is already pretty long. So I had to. I read Lord of the Atlas, which was a late 19th century. It was about two British officers. Well, they're like civilians now. I think it's after I think the British-Afghan War or something like that. But they're combat veterans, and they take on this. They become mercenaries in some conflict in North Africa, where they are there to teach some North African warlords troops artillery, and they go and have this big adventure. And it was a good novel. I enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, well, when the time comes, I'll read more. So the other one that I'm reading now, Stigmata, has been really deep on my list. I finally made my way to it once again, because I've been reading faster. And that's even sometimes there'll be an instance where I'll have a book cut in line, and I'll have a reason to like take a book, and I'll say, I'll just read that next instead of putting it at the very back. And so I made it to it. And I will say, so this is the second novel I've read of his, and I like it very much. So Colin Faulkner is becoming, and if not a favorite author, at least an author that I know I like, that if I pick up a novel of his, I'm going to like it and have a good time. So I recommend him based off of reading one whole novel and being maybe about 20% into this novel. Because I read on Kindle, I don't look at page numbers. I look at percentage. That's how it's presented to me. So, I mean, I can switch to page numbers, but not all books you can do that. So I just do percentage, and it's easier for me to. And I also like it too, because I do think a little bit about structure, about narrative structure. like the inciting incident, or where are the lines of delineation, like where's the first act, where does the first act end, where does the third act begin, uh, and seeing if I can see past the narrative, to see the structure behind it. So anyway, I'm reading that at my pace. I don't think I'll finish it next week, but probably soon. So um, we'll be doing a live on that. As far as my writing, uh, Friday is the official day that I'll start uh, making myself, what's the word, accountable for writing. I try. I'm going to go back to my old way, which is minimum of 500 words a day, Monday through Friday, taking the weekend off to do other tasks. There was a time when I was down in Florida taking care of my father, in which I felt like I was really far behind. So I was writing 7 days a week nonstop the whole time I was down there. I decided not to do that, to leave that as an option later. But in the beginning, to not do that, because I think it is important to take a step back. Now, when I say 500 words a day, that doesn't mean I write 500 words and I quit. That means on a day that I don't feel like writing, I can force myself to write 500 words. But, I'll end up writing sometimes 6, 7,000, 1,200. I don't know what's the most I've ever written a day. I think I would like to get to a point where, if I think if I'll say this, I'm my own boss, which makes me a little bit lazy. I think that if I signed a contract with a publisher to write novels for them, and there was a deadline, and that I was financially secure, where I didn't have to work another job or look for another job, I think that I could probably make myself write 2,000 words a day. But I'm not at that point right now. And so balancing my life and balancing everything, but staying on target. It's like reading 20 minutes a day. It doesn't mean I only read 20 minutes a day. It means that at minimum I have to read 20 minutes a day. So I'm hoping to have the Underground Railroad Ball, which is I believe is going to be a novella. Uh, to have it done by the end of this year and delivered. The one thing I did last week that I very there were certain tasks that, even though I gave myself a month off from writing after I published my last book, which is um, the French Fiasco, I had tasks that I wanted to do, and one was to test out the delivery system of a free book by compiling the glossary, and then getting the service book funnel and using that to deliver it not only to my existing list, but to set it up so that any new signups are going to get a copy of that book. And so that's what I've done. By the way, once again, uh, go down into the description below and you can sign up um, to get a copy of that glossary, and you'll be ready to go, so that when my novella comes out, I'm hoping by the end of the year. If no promises, but I've decided to give myself 6 months from the time I start writing to the time I distribute, and so by that I believe. Well, I can do it right now. I'm really bad at math. So it's May. So May 16th, this Friday is the day I start. So that's the start day. So if we count ahead 6 months, I'm so bad at math. This is embarrassing. I have to do this. So June, July, August, September, October, November. So November 16th is my target day to have that novella out. No promises. And then after that, I will take a month off once again, and then I'll start writing Black James. So Black James will probably be started in December, hopefully, and then I'm giving myself uh, up to 2 years. The longest I've ever taken to write a novel was 18 months from beginning to publish, and that was that Mexico, My Love? I think it was Mexico, My Love. That was an epic novel. I'm writing faster as well. Uh, and Black James, I pretty much have it largely outlined, so I know there's a lot in between though. But I know the story that I want to tell, which is great because before all it was I just wanted to write a novel about this character. Well, now I have the story, um, and have a a beginning, a middle, and end for it. So that makes it a lot easier to write, knowing where you're going. Um, and once again, my feeling is that uh, as far as tempo or uh, my goal is okay. My goal is to write 80,000 word novels. I've never written an 80,000 word novel in my life. I've read I've wrote three that are under 80,000 and three that are over 80,000. And I don't mean by a few words. I mean, the closest I ever got to it was um, The Prussian Prince was 76,000 words. And then the next book, The French Fiasco, was 109,000 words. So, you know, it's like horseshoes, right? But I would like to write 80,000 word novels. I would say 80, 80 under 100,000, somewhere between 80 and 100,000 word, I think is about right. If that means writing a 75,000 word, that's fine. But you know what I mean. It's horseshoes and hand grenades. And then my pace is, I think that, I think the shortest time between novels, that at least in release publishing wise, I think is about 9 months. Maybe the most extreme is 6 months, but faster than that, and I could be wrong, and I'm sure there's experts that can tell me why I'm wrong, is no sooner than 6 months because you're just overwhelming your readers. So I I think that at the other end, the longest you should go in between publishing novels is 4 years. And 4 years is the very extreme. I mean, anything more than that, you quit writing. You quit writing at some point and then have come back to it. So it should never be more than 4 years. And even 4 years is too long. So that's the extreme, 6 months to 4 years, right? Uh, I would say the wheelhouse of the Goldilocks wheelhouse that the pace should be is 9 months to 2 years. So anywhere between 9 months and 2 years is basically where I fall. And my first book was written and published in 9 months. My longest one was 18 months. So I've stayed in there. I would like to get that pace. Never faster than 9 months unless I change my mind about this or put under certain kind of pressure, like a publisher or whatever. But I think that's about right. I think that uh, you know I think a good research project is to look at Stephen A. Mackay, who is an independent like me, a very successful one, more successful than me, and he got a book deal with a publisher, and they wanted a three, and he has since gone back to independent. And I think most writers today, if they can do it, if they can make it work, prefer the independent. I do. Well, I don't know. I've never written for a publisher. He got a publishing deal, and they wanted a trilogy of books, and about King Alfred. And I know that he wrote them faster than they released them. And so I know that he was finishing up the third book right around the time that they were releasing the second book. So even the publishers know that with even if they have the books done, they don't release them back to back. They put time in between. So I think it would be interesting to see how much time um, expired between book one and book two as far as the um, publishing dates. I might look at that. So anyway, that is it for now. I'm going to get on with the rest of my day. Yeah, I did this one quicker. I was actually going to do this yesterday, but then once again, I got a phone call. The pattern I feel like I'm falling into now is because it's one thing to write the review and do all the sharing of it, is to do that on one day and then wait to do the live stream on it the next day. But my goal is to do a live stream a week. So the last one you got from me was last Friday, and so this is this week. So I probably won't do another one until at least Sunday. But I don't really have anything in mind. I have a list of possible things I can talk about. So we might pick one of those. Some of them are very interesting. Um, I mean, they're all interesting. That's why they're on there. So we'll see. But anyway, I'm going to call it there. We're right at the 1 hour and 30 seconds mark. So thank you for watching. And as I always say, if you're a writer, keep writing, and you should be reading if you're a writer. And as a reader, keep reading. And when you do, if there are authors that you really care about and like and want to help them, one of the biggest things you can do, even more so than buying their books, is make sure you give them stars, 5 stars if you can, uh, but as many stars as you feel that you're comfortable with, um, on Goodreads, but most importantly on Amazon. And then the next level is to write a review. And it doesn't have to be as long as mine. It can just be a couple words like, I really enjoyed this book. And that's it. That's all you have to do. But what it does is it helps the algorithm. The more ratings, the high, first of all, the algorithm favors books that are 4 stars or higher on average. And then it also favors books that have more people. So that star system, if it's 4.5 stars, but only 5 people have given you a rating, like me, like with the French Fiasco, it doesn't count as much as 4.5, and there's 1,000 people who rated it. See what I mean? And same thing goes with reviews. If there's just a couple, well, it's probably your mom and your girlfriend. But if it's hundreds, that means there's a lot of organic, and it weighs more. So help a book, not only the author but other readers, because when you give ratings and you give reviews, it helps show that book to other people that may enjoy it as well. So anyway, thank you for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you next week sometime with another video.